Second, that it seems to deal in absolutes, that it appears to want us to think of a God who is in some way or another a dictator in this world, and if this one should prove disappointing, I think you used the word dress rehearsal, the term dress rehearsal, a mere ante-room. If you think this is unfair, if you think this is discrepant, if you think this is irrational, why do the evil prosper? Why do the good get trampled underfoot and left behind? Never mind. Once you've squeezed with agony through the keyhole of death, there's another whole world where all that will be put right, where every tear will be dried and every injustice compensated, which, if it was true, would be a terrible exercise in sadomasochism. And why put a bunch of rats into a labyrinth of torture? See how they do, surprise them with new rules, even bigger surprise when you squeeze them through that last gap. Ah! Now we have you, and now you're due for a verdict against which there is no appeal. The incremental effort of a lot of steady work that some of us have been putting in to dispel illusions in the supernatural, and in a private belief that I've held for a long time, which is that very many of the practitioners of these faiths don't believe it either. And perhaps that might be the first consolation that we take away from this evening's discussion. My own task having been so much lightened, even though I retain the tiny suspicion, and I hope it's an ignoble one, that Rabbi Shmuley might possibly be going easy on me. And that would be a great cause of resentment. If I thought for a second that that was true, it's already bad enough that I'm the fifth person appearing on this stage, and you may have noticed the steady decline in the standard of pulchritude that went on after number 3 had left the stage. So I'm left to restate what I still want to say and have to begin with a disagreement. The idea that a person who martyrs himself and kills others in the cause of the faith will be rewarded in paradise is not a delusion of Muhammad Atta's. I wish it was. It would be very nice if we could say that that was the case. It is rather a belief firmly rooted in the holy book of the Muslim faith, the Quran. It is believed by an enormous number of people. It may not be disbelieved that someone who martyrs himself for the faith will be so rewarded. To do that would be to challenge the authenticity of the book, and therefore cannot be done. The most that can be done is to say that somebody interpreted this mad instruction incorrectly, but we would be living in a very happy world indeed if this was just a delusion of one leader of a 19-man gang. The same, I think, can be said of, I think it's, you'll correct me, I'm sure, Shmuley, if I'm mistaken, but I think it's number 13 of the Rambam's list of articles of faith, Maimonides' opinions of what it's necessary to believe in order to be of the faithful, that there will be a resurrection. It comes just after, I think, the belief that the Messiah will come. Though, because it's Maimonides, because it's the Rambam, he does say, though he may tarry, you may not doubt that he will come, nor may you doubt that you're due another life. Now, I'm sorry. I take this stuff very seriously because I have to deal with, as I do with the Christian version of it, put so creepily and so shadily that we bury our dead, the Christian faith, of which I'm not a member, they bury their dead in what they call, in this slightly evasive way, the sure and certain hope of resurrection. Not the sureness and the certainty of, you notice. They haven't got the arrogance for that anymore, but the sure and certain hope of resurrection. These are the beliefs on which monotheism has based itself and upon which it continues to exert its extraordinary and lethal power. And I won't take your offer. Rabbi, I can't take it. I can't say all they're talking about is posthumous fame. All they're talking about is reputation. After all, people still read Shakespeare. Surely that proves that there's an afterlife. No, I'm sorry. It's a confusion of categories. It's not comparing like with like. It's not even non-overlapping magisteria. It's radically discrepant views of what reality is. And if religion would say, we don't promise you anything after death, that would be the end of it. And Shmuley would be talking ethical Judaism, and I would be saying, atheism is compatible with any belief you like. You can be an atheist and be a supporter of Ayn Rand, the most famous atheist in America. You can be an atheist and a nihilist. You can be an atheist and a fascist. All you have to do is say that you reject the supernatural dimension. But that's the most crucial thing. And now the critique of religion that we've evolved over the years in mortal combat with it is this, essentially. First, that it has a very queasy relationship with anything called evidence. That it makes very, very large claims for itself. Perhaps Rabbi Shmuley won't choose this evening to do so, but it claims to talk in terms of redemption, of salvation, and even of eternity. And there's an inverse relationship between what it claims and the amount of evidence that it can muster. And that this is its original, if you like, sin. Second, that it seems to deal in absolutes, that it appears to want us to think of a God who is in some way or another a dictator in this world, and if this one should prove disappointing, I think you used the word dress rehearsal, the term dress rehearsal, a mere ante-room. If you think this is unfair, if you think this is discrepant, if you think this is irrational, why do the evil prosper? Why do the good get trampled underfoot and left behind? Never mind. Once you've squeezed with agony through the keyhole of death, there's another whole world where all that will be put right, where every tear will be dried and every injustice compensated, which, if it was true, would be a terrible exercise in sadomasochism. Why put a bunch of rats into a labyrinth of torture? See how they do, surprise them with new rules, even bigger surprise when you squeeze them through that last gap. Now we have you, and now you're due for a verdict against which there is no appeal. If you don't believe in that as a scheme, you don't believe in God, you don't believe in the biblical promise of redemption and salvation, and you certainly don't believe in the resurrection. So I think Shmuley's word on that is that that's the case, is as good as anyone else's, and I would say perhaps better than some. But I'm talking also to people who will be tuning into this broadcast later, and I have a captive audience, and so I've got a couple more points to make before I rest the case that you smoothed for me.
Religions promise resurrection and eternal life, but there's no evidence to support it. Science has been studying death for centuries, and every reliable study shows the same thing. When the brain dies, consciousness ends. Neuroscience confirms memory, identity, and awareness are tied to brain function. Once oxygen and blood flow stop, those processes shut down permanently. There has never been a documented reversal. Historically, claims of resurrection are rooted in tradition, not fact. Even the Bible is full of contradictions about it. Matthew 27:52-53 says saints rose from their graves when Jesus died, yet no other gospel or historian of that time mentions this extraordinary event. That silence is strong evidence it didn't happen. The Christian doctrine of the resurrection itself comes from Paul's letters, written decades after Jesus' death, not from eyewitness records. Hitchens is right. The larger the promise, the less evidence there is. And when Christians bury their dead in the sure and certain hope of resurrection, Book of Common Prayer, notice even the wording admits it's only hope, not certainty. Contrast that with what we know from science. Death is final. Religion offers eternal rewards, but it can't prove them.
That it's based on, there's another element in our critique of it, is that it's based on wishful as well as delusional thinking. Above all, wishful thinking. What is a stronger desire in the human species than that we shall conquer death? We are the only primates, as far as we know, we're the only members even of our own species, the primate species, who are fully aware of death and absolutely unreconciled to the idea of our own extinction. Even though we know our chemical composition, we know we are made out of the same elements as the rest of the cosmos. In fact, rather miraculously, if you want to call it that, we're even made out of stardust. Stars had to die for us to live. So we think it's overwhelmingly probable that when we die, our chemical ingredients will return to the natural biological and biochemical cycle, and there seems no evidence to the contrary. There may be animals who know how to fear death, but certainly no animals who know how to deny it. That's why it's so interesting that among the most frequently asked questions of people to their priests and mullahs and rabbis about the afterlife is, will my dog or cat be there too? And you notice they only ask that, will Timmy be in heaven or Rover? They never say, will that hellish tabby I once had be reassembled in the infernal regions? This is enough to show how wishful the thinking is. Now, I see that Shmuley has Dinesh's clever but, I think, thin book on the case for the afterlife in front of him. And in one debate that I had with Dinesh, he briefly gave me pause by saying, yes, wishful thinking for heaven, all right. That's hedonistic, that's a hope, that's a desire. But then why would people who were wish-thinking, why would they want hell? Good point, and it tells against simple-minded Freudianism, as does a lot of other evidence. But not all of our wishes are completely transparent to us, I think, and not all of them are hedonistic, especially as they respect or regard other people. I was one of the 2 or 3 white people in the audience at Madison Square Garden in 1985 when Louis Farrakhan gave his famous address to a packed house of the Nation of Islam and addressed the Jews of the greater New York area in a taunting manner and reminded them, and I'll never forget it, he said, and remember, Jews, when God puts you in the ovens, it's forever. And I shall not soon forget the great moan and groan of pleasure that came from that audience at hearing that. And I should have been prepared for it, not just by the stupidity and nastiness and criminality on which this religious nutbag makes his living in this country. Call someone an imam or a priest or a reverend, there's nothing they can't get away with in our culture. If I could change one thing, it would be that. The second would be when someone gets up and says, I'm a person of faith, that they don't get respect for it. They think that's a respect-producing statement. I am a person of faith. You know, I'm a person who will believe practically anything on no evidence at all. Well, you said it, mister. Respect comes later. I digress. I shouldn't have been surprised by this orgy of sadism and cruelty and gloating from Farrakhan's religious audience, because I've read the Christian fathers. I've read Tertullian, who, answering some questions, one of the great fathers of the church, we see why hell is unpleasant. Why is heaven such fun? It seems to be rather dutiful. Endless praise, endless worship, endless subjection, endless tedium. You think that the Lord himself, after the first 5 billion years, would have had enough of the songs of praise. No, it's got to go on forever. Okay, where's the good bits? Tertullian says that we've thought of the good bits. In the intervals of that, you can go to the edge and you can go and look down and gloat on the torments and endless tortures of the damned. We've thought of that. Now, excuse me, that is a founding statement of Christianity. You can't disown it now. These churches wouldn't be here oppressing us. These mosques wouldn't be here incubating madmen and suicide bombers. There wouldn't be mad Jewish settlers on the West Bank thinking if we could only steal other people's land and bring on the Messiah and Armageddon, everything would be all right. There wouldn't be anything of this if it was left to the rabbi, and myself, but it's not. And Joseph Ratzinger, His Holiness the Pope, has just got off the plane in England today to announce that atheists are Nazis. An overdressed little ponce who was himself a member of the Hitler Youth dares to speak this way. He leaves the palace that quite rightly, Shmuley points out, was built on the sale of indulgences. Well, picture the church as if it had not done that. Are you talking about the same formidable multinational force? No, you're not. Have they disowned what they did? No, they haven't. Are there not still chantries all around the world where prayers are paid for and said for the souls of the dead so that there may be remission from sin, measured, by the way, in years and decades? Or, if you've paid a lot of money to a chantry, maybe centuries of remission from sin, as if the Gregorian calendar is used for matters of eternity and infinity. The pathos, the obviousness of this fraud still goes on, and Ratzinger himself is reinstituting the idea that by making donations to the church and regular appearances at its festivals, there may be an element of remission too. And only now is it being discussed that St. Augustine's vile idea that the souls of unbaptized children may not go to hell but go to an indefinite misery of limbo until the second coming may possibly not have been the way quite the tone of voice in which to speak to parents who'd lost their child. I'm not neutral about this. I don't think those statements are what they clearly are, man-made, silly, pathetic, mediocre, and erroneous. That is a job within the compass of anyone in this room or beyond. No, I go further. It's an evil doctrine. It's a wicked doctrine. It proceeds from people who want, quite wisely and quite shrewdly, real power over real human beings of a really absolutist sort in the only world we've got, which is the here and now. How smart they are to do it, how overdue we are to tell them that we reject this totalitarian interpretation of human life. Well, I'm not going to say why I don't think near-death experiences are impressive now. So you've spared me that, thank you. Though I wish someone would ask about them. And I think, excuse me, I think I've probably trespassed anyway on the allotted period of my time. But what I say is, thanks for coming, and bring it on, and don't make me suspect that you're sparing me. Thank you.
Hitchens is right that belief in an afterlife is built on wishful thinking. Humans are the only species fully aware of their mortality, and psychology shows we create comforting myths to deny it. Ernest Becker's book, The Denial of Death, explains how cultures invent immortality stories to cope with fear. Neuroscience shows consciousness is a product of the brain, and when brain activity ends, awareness ends. There's no evidence of anything beyond. Even Christianity's picture of heaven and hell reflects human desires and fears, not reality. Early church fathers like Tertullian openly wrote that part of heaven's joy is watching the damned suffer in hell. That isn't love, it's sadism turned into doctrine. The Bible itself reinforces fear. In Matthew 25:46, Jesus says the wicked will face eternal punishment, while the righteous gain eternal life. But there's no evidence for either claim. Historically, the church monetized this fear with indulgences, literally selling forgiveness measured in years out of purgatory. That practice built St. Peter's Basilica. It's not divine truth, it's a financial racket. And science shows the opposite. When we die, our atoms return to nature. We are stardust, recycled into the universe.
All believe in it. The Talmud says that the patriarch Jacob did not die, because the Bible says he didn't die. It says Vayigva, he was elevated. So the Talmud says, Yaakov Avinu lo mes, our patriarch Jacob never died. And then it says, what do you mean he didn't die? It says he was buried. It says that Pharaoh led a giant procession with Joseph, the viceroy of Egypt, with so many kings who put their crowns on his coffin. He died. And the Talmud says no. Mazaro b'chaim, afu b'chaim. Because his children live in the example that he displayed. He has an afterlife through them. I see that with Christopher. I see it with Martin Luther King. I'm a white Jew. But his afterlife impacts me almost every day of my life, because he was the greatest American of the 20th century, because he restored us to the founding principles of this nation. And every time we want to move away from it, every time someone says something stupid and racist, stupid and too ethnic, stupid and prejudicial, we remember that he had a dream. And that dream wasn't just while he was a collection of swirling electrons and molecules. That dream transcended him, and it lives on in his afterlife. And it impacts upon us until this very day. I am not interested in heaven, and I couldn't give a damn about hell. If I'm destined to burn, then so be it. I don't want to be in some perfect place where I have nothing to contribute. In my religion and Judaism, when I go to a cemetery to pray at the graves of great people who represented a great idea so that I'm inspired by their vision, by their dream, by their message, I am obligated to tuck in my tzitzit. I'm obligated to not perform any of the Torah's commandments in their presence. The reason? Because we're not jealous of them in heaven. They're jealous of us on earth. They want to do more good deeds. They want to practice more virtue. A perfect abode in heaven is one of the worst religious ideas, even as I affirm a full belief in it. Not that I can prove it. I can't. I cannot. It's a sheer matter of faith. I reject all the silly arguments that are often offered in the name of religion. Near-death experiences, bright lights hovering above your hospital bed. I even saw this cartoon. that said, it showed these surgeons who were operating on someone, and on top there was a giant sign that said, "If you can read this, you are dead." I reject near-death experiences. I don't believe they are scientifically acceptable. There's plenty of ways to explain it. Ouija boards, people who speak to the dead are all frauds to a man. I debated them on Larry King, all the people who speak to those in the afterlife, Sylvia Brown and John Edward and James Van Prague. We were on Larry King, and I said, "Larry, this is my yarmulke, and if one of these guys can get up right now and tell us when the next IED will explode in Iraq and Afghanistan, thereby saving the life of a brave American hero, because they can communicate with the dead, who they see the future, I will put salt and pepper on this yarmulke, and I will eat it right here on national TV."
Shmuley admits it outright. I affirm a full belief in the afterlife. Not that I can prove it. I can't. It's a sheer matter of faith. And that's the problem. No evidence, no data, just belief. Hitchens was right. The afterlife is built on wishful thinking. It's a projection of our fear of death and our desire to live forever. Psychology confirms this in terror management theory. Humans create stories about heaven, souls, and transcendence to reduce existential anxiety. Shmuley tries to dress it up by saying Judaism's afterlife is about legacy. Jacob lives on through his children. Martin Luther King lives on through his dream. But that's not supernatural survival. That's just memory, history, and culture. Neuroscience tells us consciousness dies with the brain. Martin Luther King's speeches endure because people preserve them, not because his soul floats in another realm. And when Shmuley points to Hitler, suggesting there must be an afterlife or justice isn't real, he misses the point. Creating a cosmic torture chamber doesn't solve evil. It's just vengeance projected into eternity. Justice is a human responsibility. Courts, law, accountability here and now. Adding a mythical afterlife doesn't punish Hitler. It just consoles the living. Even his dismissal of near-death experiences shows the inconsistency. He's right, they're not evidence. But that undercuts his entire case. If faith alone is the standard, then any delusion qualifies, including the very extremist distortions he condemns. You can't reject false afterlives without evidence and then claim your own version without evidence. In the end, Hitchens' critique stands. Religions exploit humanity's fear of death, sell false promises like indulgences, and hold power over people with doctrines of heaven and hell. The truth is simpler and far more beautiful. We are stardust, and when we die, our atoms return to the universe. Our legacy lives only in what we build, the love we give, and the knowledge we pass on. That's real, verifiable, and doesn't need wishful thinking. Outro. So what do you think? Is the afterlife nothing more than a human invention to soothe our fear of death? Or do you think Shmuley is right, that there's something beyond, even if it can't be
totalitarian, and they're both based upon two very, very questionable and not very peaceful concepts. One is the idea of a perfect human being, the Prophet Muhammad, and the other is the idea of a perfect book, the Quran, the recitation. Therefore, any challenge to this faith is bound to lead to heresy and to schism, and does. And just as all forms of absolutism and totalitarianism, leader worship and revealed truth, unalterable text, always do, because they can break, perhaps, but they cannot bend. And thus the latent potential of violence between them, among them, as well as within them, is very great. In which he ponders one very important question, the only one I've got time for now. What happened to the word Christendom? Remember, there used to be such a term. It used to extend across the world, and the hope is that it would extend even further. And it was unironically used to mean those areas of human civilization, and areas yet to be civilized, of course, where the word of Jesus Christ reigned or would reign. And it's all gone. The word is never used except historically or sarcastically now. And McCulloch doesn't say it ended because of the Crusades, though he could. It didn't. Crusades didn't kill it. Not because of slavery, mandated by Christianity. That didn't kill it either. nor the mass murder of colonial subjects in the yet-to-be-Christianized world. That wasn't sufficient. It didn't really end, he said, till 1914, when all the Christian empires of the world, Austria-Hungary, Germany, France, Britain, France is a slight exception to this, but only a slight one, and Russia, all of them commanded by Christian emperors and calling upon their subjects as Christians, went to war with each other and very nearly destroyed the whole human civilization, and certainly reduced it to a point where we can't guess where we might be if it hadn't been for this extraordinary outbreak of barbarism. And out of that came the terrors of fascism and of Stalinism, of which it was the seedbed as well. I mention this partly because I want to maintain that there's no such thing as a religion of peace by definition. And second, to point out, and that its best historian has to admit something that if I was a Christian would make me humiliated. But because there was another empire involved in that war, the Ottoman Empire, which also came to an end, its other name was the Caliphate, the Muslim Caliphate. It went to war on the side of German and Austrian imperialism and Hungarian imperialism, and it lost not just the war, having proclaimed a worldwide jihad against Christianity, except for German and Austrian and Hungarian Christianity, which were its allies. And it didn't just lose the war, but by 1924 had been dissolved by the Turkish leadership, by Ataturk. It lost the Caliphate. And that's the only one that still has supporters. The other Christian and religious empires have all gone. But the Caliphate still has fans, not just in the Muslim world, sometimes referred to by Muslims as the Dar al-Islam, the House of Islam, but also in what some Muslims call the Dar al-Harb, the House of War, the part of the world that isn't yet Muslim. There are Caliphate clubs in London now and Berlin and elsewhere, quite important ones. And what I want to know is why that is and what we should think about it. Believers in this fantasy have, Laurie's spared me the need to say much of this, have committed extraordinary atrocities in Istanbul, in Madrid, in India, in the Philippines, in Indonesia, and of course in our own fair city. And the pretexts for it vary. They can be, the excuse for the mass murder can be that Australia has helped East Timor become independent from Indonesia. They can be that Newsweek has printed a false story about the desecration of a supposedly holy book. You never know what it's going to be next. But everyone knows to be careful about it, and everyone understands that the threat of violence that backs it is believable. And that's my opening position. Now you will say, I can hear it already being said, you may be saying it already to yourselves because the defense mechanisms kick in. And in any case, Laurie already said it for you. And I hope Professor Ramadan won't feel the need to say it again, but if he does, fair enough. You may say, that's not the real Islam. Those aren't real Muslims. Now, isn't that a fascinating objection? Is there anyone in this room, I exempt Professor Ramadan because it's his turn to speak next, is there anyone in this room who would care to arbitrate that question? Who is to say, where is the authority that defines who is a true son of the prophet or true interpreter of his work? Part of the problem to begin with, and it's part of the problem because it is a religion, is that it's perfectly true to say we don't know who the true Muslims are. How right that is, who does speak for it. Only the second problem with defining Islam as peaceful, only the second problem with defining it as peaceful has to do with the fact that it's highly fissile and highly schismatic, that there is a civil war going on within it, the religion of peace. As we speak, at least one civil war between the votaries of this religion of peace is already taking place, and some of it is exported outside that world into ours, very salient fact. The first reason, though, is this. Islam makes very large claims for itself. Very large claims indeed. It claims to be the last and final religion, the last and final revelation. When you see bumper stickers, everyone says you can't reduce major things to a bumper sticker. It's not my idea to have bumper stickers saying Islam is the solution. It's a well-known slogan, actually, of parties associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. They say Islam is the solution for everything. It takes care of all your life and the one to come. Sexuality, political economy, banking, diet, relations with other religions, everything. It's a total solution. What is creepy about the word total? I hope I don't have to tell an audience like this. It's the first 5 letters of the word totalitarian. It's absolute. It's absolute. It's all-inclusive. It's unanswerable. And oddly, for a religion that makes such large claims, notice another thing about Islam, it doesn't particularly like having these claims questioned or scrutinized. In other words, just as there is with all religions an inverse relationship between the claims they make and the evidence they can produce for them, you must have noticed that, with Islam, a younger religion, and perhaps therefore more in its first flush, there's an extraordinarily strong willingness to say that any challenge to its absolutist claims is by definition profane. And profanity and blasphemy can be the antecedent to very severe punishment, and often are, for Muslims and for non-Muslims. And this is not a road of peace in my submission. Thus my first point completed.
Hitchens is right to reject the idea of any religion of peace by definition. History shows that both Christendom and the Caliphate were political empires as much as spiritual ones, spreading influence through war, colonialism, and control over daily life. The fall of Christian empires after World War I didn't end religious imperialism. The Ottoman Caliphate was only dissolved in 1924, and yet the idea still inspires movements today that openly call for global religious rule. Islam, like Christianity in its imperial phase, makes sweeping claims that it is the final revelation, the ultimate solution to politics, economics, law, and morality. That's not just belief, that's a blueprint for totalitarianism. When a system declares itself complete and beyond question, dissent becomes heresy, and heresy becomes punishable, sometimes by death. This isn't hypothetical, from apostasy laws in countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran to violent reactions over cartoons or books. The pattern is clear. Any ideology that claims authority over every part of life, demands immunity from criticism, and enforces obedience with threats cannot honestly be described as peaceful. Peace requires the freedom to question without fear.
The claim to govern everything from hygiene to sex and the afterlife, which contains detailed prescriptions for the good and bad versions of itself, again strikes me as somewhat totalitarian, and they're both based upon 2 very, very questionable and not very peaceful concepts. One is the idea of a perfect human being, the Prophet Muhammad, and the other is the idea of a perfect book, the Quran, the recitation. Now, the category perfect human primate or mammal and the category flawless book that could possibly not use any kind of change, revision, or editing are categories that do not exist. There are no members of these categories. Therefore, any challenge to this faith is bound to lead to heresy and to schism, and does. And just as all forms of absolutism and totalitarianism, leader worship and revealed truth, unalterable text, always do, because they can break, perhaps, but they cannot bend. And thus the latent potential of violence between them, among them, as well as within them, is very great. And at any moment, someone is in danger of being accused of being an apostate or an unbeliever. This week, the Coptic Pope of Egypt, Pope Shenouda, who represents 10 million Egyptians, was hustled onto Egyptian TV. He's not asked on all that often. I don't think he was even asked on this time. I think he was told he'd better come on. Why is the leader of Egypt's huge Christian minority suddenly compelled to make a TV appearance? Because one of his bishops had said in an interview that he thought that some of the verses of the Quran showed signs of having been added later on and to have been later accretion. And Pope Shenouda was forced onto the television to say, it's not that that didn't happen, it's it couldn't have happened. It shouldn't even be discussed. so that it has to be claimed even by non-Muslim subjects of a Muslim state that there is, after all, because no Christian claims this about the Bible anymore, no Jew claims it about the Pentateuch, after all, yes, there is just one book that's completely word and letter perfect from the first time it was not even written down, but recited. Now, demands that you believe the impossible do not lead to peaceful outcomes. Nor do they lead to peaceful or tolerant regimes. And I'm not going to ask you which Muslim country you would like to live in. I don't know whether Professor Ramana will tell us which one he would pick if he had to, because I don't have to ask you a question like that, because it's already in your mind.
Can you wind up now?
Yes, I can. I can, yes, and will. Shall, in fact. Sexual repression doesn't lead to peace. The idea that women are inferior to men is a profound cause of unease, let's say the least of it. All religions make some form of this claim. Islam seems to make it less apologetically than most. Claims that the world will come to an end in an apocalyptic form, which will lead to the victory of one religion or another, are not peaceful either. It's possible, perhaps, I haven't exhausted all my remarks, that the endless teaching of battle stories to children and the stories of lethal feuds from 7th century Arabia don't lead to peace, or the forcing of children to memorize and retell such stories by rote doesn't lead to peace either. It's arguable that peace isn't attainable at all. It may be arguable in some forms, that sometimes in places that religion isn't even desirable, but it will not come by the fanatical adoption of a man-made text and a man-made supreme leader. Nothing but war and tyranny has ever come from the adoption of formulae like these. The only way to moral and intellectual satisfaction, even temporary, perhaps only temporary, but of any kind at all, comes to those who are willing to take the great risk of thinking for themselves at all hazards and trying to share the benefits of that tolerance and that open-mindedness with others. And with that, for now, I'll rest my case. Thank you very much.
Hitchens is right. The idea of a flawless human and a flawless book has no precedent in reality. No person is morally perfect. Even Muhammad's own biography in Islamic sources records acts like ordering assassinations of critics and waging wars of expansion. No text is beyond revision. The Quran itself wasn't compiled until decades after Muhammad's death, and early manuscripts like the Sana palimpsest show textual variations. Yet Islamic orthodoxy treats questioning this as a crime, punishable by prison or death in countries from Pakistan to Iran. This isn't just history. In 2023, a man in Nigeria was sentenced to death for a WhatsApp message deemed blasphemous, and in Saudi Arabia, women have been jailed for tweeting criticism of religious policy. The belief that women are inherently inferior is codified in laws on inheritance, Quran 4:11, Testimony 2:282, and dress, fostering systemic inequality. Teaching children violent tales of 7th century battles as moral lessons ensures cycles of sectarian hatred, just as Bible-based justifications for slavery and holy war once did in Christianity.
Unbaptized children don't go there forever in isolation and loneliness, after all, because they didn't get the sprinkle of water. You can relax. No, you can't. Millions of parents thought that's where their dead children have gone, ladies and gentlemen, for hundreds of years. Miserable, frightened, humiliated, upset. They believed it. It was real to them. It was cruel to tell them this nonsense to begin with. It's even more cruel to say, after all, that it's not true, but never mind. After hundreds of years of that, we have to apologize for a few other things too. The Inquisition, sorry about that. The role of the church in the final solution, maybe a mistake. The Crusades, no, we wouldn't do it the same way now. The massacre of Byzantine and Eastern Orthodox Christians, up till the very recent past in the Balkans. We owe them an apology. There's quite a lot to be taking on, isn't it? But never mind, we're getting ready to be infallible all over again. This stuff is not to be believed. What's the worldview of the dog? The dog is given by you food, shelter, water, love, affection, and it thinks you're God. The cat is given food, warmth, shelter, love, but it thinks it's God. Religion makes the following appeal to us, which is why I say it poisons everything, because it goes to the deep nature of our self-respect and our humanity and our integrity. It makes the following bid to us. It says, you are born sinful. You're born guilty. You're guilty of crimes that were committed before you were born. You are not able to evade them. Your sin is original. You're made from dust, or in the Quran, from a clot of blood. Your Creator is not in a very good mood with you, and there's no reason why he should be, given what a piece of excrement you basically are. That's the masochistic element of it. But after this thoroughgoing abjection, thoroughgoing demand that you throw aside all your self-respect, you're told there is, however, some redeeming news. The universe is designed with you in mind. The cosmos cares what happens to you. And if you will continue to abject yourself like a serf in front of God, you may hope for the forgiveness of sins, for eternal life, and for a divine plan. In other words, the maximum appeal to the abject, to the servile in you, and the maximum appeal to the self-centered and the egomaniac. Not a very wholesome way to begin a discussion about the main questions, such as why are we here? Who are we? What are we here for? What is the just city? How would it look like? What is the meaning of life? It's begun by a horrible lecture from a dictator. And you're then further told that if you do not bow the knee to a celestial dictatorship, unalterable, unchangeable, unappealable to, if you don't believe in that, you would have no means of telling right from wrong. How would you know how to do the right thing or avoid the wrong if you were not being told by a celestial dictatorship? Once again, an absolutely central attack on any concept that we might have of our own integrity, dignity, and self-respect. How would Huck Finn know? Admittedly, he's a fictional character, but then, so most of the people I'm going to be discussing from Moses onwards. How does Huck Finn know that he's not to betray his friend Jim? He's not to give him back. He's not to give him up to the people who are hunting for him. How does Mark Twain know that we will like Huck when he refuses this? What does Huck know? The law is against him. The church is against him. All the preachments of religion and customary law are against him. He thinks that if he refuses the demand to give up his slave friend, he's going to go straight to hell. That's what he thinks, but he still does the right thing. As we might all hope to do, as we must all hope to do, if we were tested much less than that. It's innate in us. Religion gets its morals from us. We know what the right thing is without being told by a celestial dictatorship. If it were otherwise, this is why I say I'm an anti-theist, not an atheist. If it were otherwise, what would the situation be? Every one of our waking and sleeping thoughts would be under permanent surveillance at all times from the moment of our conception, according to some at any rate, certainly birth, until not just when we died, because that's when the real fun would begin. Now, it's as if those who wish it to be true, which I do not, you can be an atheist and wish that there was a God. Many atheists I know do wish it was true. Why do I not? Because I don't want to live in the celestial North Korea. I'm one of the few people who's been to, as a writer, to North Korea and Iran and Iraq too, to all the axis of evil countries in the last few years. When I was young and was told that this is what paradise will be like, you get to praise God all the time, forever, and continue thanking him for everything he's doing for you, sometimes with the aid of musical instruments. But that's the thing, that's what paradise will be like, everlasting praise. I used to think, sounds like hell to me. But I also wondered, what would it be like? I couldn't quite picture it. An attempt is made in the movie Bedazzled, the first version, to try and convey how ghastly it would be. Well, now I know. I've been to a state where there's worship from dawn till dusk and thanking for everything you've got, every tiny crumb, and there's what you'll get too is the tiny crumb. Nothing but thanks, nothing but praise. It's a state where not everybody knows this. Kim Jong-il is not the absolute dictator of North Korea. He's only the head of the party and of the North Korean army. The head of the state, the president, is his late father, who's been dead for some 15 years, Kim Il-sung. He's still the president, and he's the president, if you pardon the expression, for life, even though he's, as it were, passed on, ceased to be, joined the choir in visibule, turned up his toes. He's an ex-president. You could call it a necrocracy, a thanatocracy, a mausolocracy. And it's also, you'll notice, just one short of a trinity, because the Son is the reincarnation of the Father. That's what it would be like if this horrible Bronze Age Palestinian myth was true. Unending, eternal, unchallengeable, unchangeable slavery. Who wants it to be true? That's my first question to myself. I'll answer it later. And to you, since I haven't got a debate partner, and to you, ladies and gentlemen, why would anyone want it to be true? If I don't remember to ask myself, isn't secular dictatorship sometimes just as bad? If I don't remember to ask myself this, promise me one of you will, because we can't skip that point. Okay. Why is it wonderful to be here in Seattle and in North America having this discussion at this moment? Because everybody in America believes that everybody else is a strong believer. Everybody believes the opinion polls that say everyone else goes to church and believes in Satan more than they believe in Darwin. Everyone else thinks you can't run for office unless you bow the knee. And this is not true, and your presence here partly materializes my belief that it isn't, as did my swing through the South, where thousands of people came to each stop and all looked around themselves thinking, God, I thought I was the only atheist in this town till I got here. We had to move out of the bookstore in North Carolina into a church to fill up the oversburns. And the pastor said to me, he said, I shouldn't be telling you this. This made my day, he said, I shouldn't be telling you this. This damn church has never been this full. And North Carolina can be a hard row to hoe for an unbeliever, I'm here to tell you, but it's not that tough. Well, I thought, because the Lord sent me the death of Jerry Falwell that week.
When Hitchens points out that religion begins by telling us we're born guilty, he's right. The doctrine of original sin comes straight from Augustine in the 4th century, not from Jesus himself. Even Paul's letters in Romans 5:12 were stretched later to mean all humans inherit Adam's guilt. That means Christianity built much of its foundation on a man-made interpretation, not divine truth. Science also shows morality doesn't come from a celestial dictator. Evolutionary biology explains empathy and cooperation as survival traits. Franz de Waal's studies on primates show chimpanzees comfort the distressed and share food without any concept of God or sin. Morality is in our biology. History proves the same. Societies like ancient China and India developed moral codes, Confucian ethics, Buddhist compassion, completely separate from Christianity. They didn't need the Bible to know murder or theft was wrong. Even the Bible undercuts its own claim. In Genesis 3, Adam and Eve are punished for seeking knowledge, not for committing an actual crime. And in Exodus, God orders genocide against whole peoples, including children. If morality comes from God, why does his law so often conflict with our innate sense of justice?
Turn a page of your newspaper any day you like. See what the parties of God are doing to Iraqi society to drag it down to the level of Afghanistan or Somalia, the last two countries where the parties of God had it all their own way. Look next door to Iran, where people who believe in a tooth fairy figure called the hidden Imam, the 12th Imam, whose immediate advent is expected, which will, it won't surprise you to hear, bring about a reign of universal peace and justice when it comes. Wonder where they picked up that idea. But perhaps as a sign of a lack of confidence in this belief, Mr. Ahmadinejad is currently building a new boulevard into the center of Tehran, on which to welcome the motorcade of this Imam when he returns from his exclusion. Just in case that doesn't work or doesn't happen, why not pirate and plagiarize some nuclear weapons? They know nothing about science themselves. They couldn't do physics. They don't care about the beauties of science. The wonders of the cosmos don't appeal to them at all. But they can probably steal, or have stolen, the ingredients to make a nuclear weapon. So we now have what we've long feared we're going to have, the coincidence between an apocalyptic ideology and, or rather, should I say, a messianic ideology and an apocalyptic weapon. It's going to happen now. It'll happen very soon. Well, suck on that for a second. I've already said what the crazed messianic settlers in the neighboring or not far off West Bank are doing, and who their best friends in America are, the Falwellites and Robertson clones, who think it's amusing to try and propose that, with the help of sources I gather in Washington state, that stultifying nonsense be taught to our children in American schools in the year 2007 as equal time. So, hey kids, the chemistry class is over, now get ready for the alchemy period. Astronomy's over, you'll be glad to hear. It's a hard subject, but cheer up, after the break, astrology teacher will be on the scene. What is this nonsense? How can anyone put up with it for a single second? The evil attempt to make children ignorant and frightened. That is also augmented very strongly by another priesthood, which has been teaching them about hellfire and limbo, though they've just dropped limbo at the last minute, as the Pope did recently notice. Limbo's over now. Unbaptized children don't go there forever in isolation and loneliness, after all, because they didn't get the sprinkle of water. You can relax. No, you can't. Millions of parents thought that's where their dead children had gone, ladies and gentlemen, for hundreds of years. Miserable, frightened, humiliated, upset. They believed it. It was real to them. It was cruel to tell them this nonsense to begin with. It's even more cruel to say, after all, that it's not true, but never mind. After hundreds of years of that, we have to apologize for a few other things too. The Inquisition, sorry about that. The role of the church in the final solution, maybe a mistake. The Crusades, no, we wouldn't do it the same way now. The massacre of Byzantine and Eastern Orthodox Christians, up till the very recent past in the Balkans, we owe them an apology. There's quite a lot to be taking on, isn't it? But never mind, we're getting ready to be infallible all over again. This stuff is not to be believed. And you live in a country where you don't have to, and mustn't be intimidated by the supposed strength of illusions like this, or the people who peddle them. Where I was very kind to mention that I recently took my oath as an American citizen at the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. Actually, it was on the 13th of April, which is his birthday and also mine. And I'm in a small way his biographer, and I was able to arrange to take the oath at the tidal basin by his memorial. And I made a little speech about the Virginia Statute on Religious Freedom, which is the basis of the tremendous First Amendment to our Constitution, that guarantees, as you know, that there can be no clerical meddling in our public and political life. And the shorthand phrase for that was uttered by the president in a letter that he wrote to the Baptists of Danbury, Connecticut, seeking refuge from persecution. From the Congregationalists of Danbury, Connecticut, by the way, it's who they were afraid of, in which he said there will be a wall of separation forever on this point. So I now have a new slogan for you. Mr. Jefferson, build up that wall. And I believe it's entirely possible that we can construct a cement here between what is patriotic, what is decent, what is rational, and what is not faith-based. I think it can be done, and I think it can start here. Okay. Enough from me. What about my debating partner? What has he got to say to this? Well, how would you be, Mr. Hitchens, how would you be moral if it wasn't for God? How would you know what morality was? What's your warrant for saying what's right and wrong? I always politely pause at this point as if I'd never heard this nonsense before. Okay, so I am wrong when I get a sense of satisfaction from giving a pint of blood. It comes from nowhere. I don't lose the pint. I get it back after a cup of tea and I lie down, but someone else gets a pint of blood they may very well need. A great little transaction. I don't do enough of it. And I have a rare blood group myself, and I might one day want the same person, or someone else rather, to do the same for me. But it's not just a utilitarian transaction. I positively enjoy doing it. Is this from nowhere? I certainly don't know of any heavenly reason, I think. All right, if that's not good enough for you. By the way, give blood whenever you can. It's a noble thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And you may need some blood one day yourself. And you shouldn't be ashamed of the fact that this comes from human solidarity, without which we wouldn't be here in the first place or able to have a language to discuss this in. But all right. Think of my Jewish ancestors, such as they were, hobbling around in the desert. I don't believe a word of the story. Even Israeli archaeology has completely and conclusively disproved the story of Exodus, as is detailed at some length in my book. There was no such presence in Egypt. There was no exile. There was no wandering. There was a lot of massacre and murder and theft, but then there always is when religious tribes are walking around. Let's assume the story is true. Let's assume it. Am I to be insulted by being told that my ancestors did not know until they got to Sinai that perjury and murder and theft were not kosher? Up till then, they thought those are the things we like best. It's a bit of a facer to get all this way and then to have someone tell us that's not on anymore. No, we all have to, I'll repeat myself, we all have to have more self-respect than that. They wouldn't have got that far or anywhere. They would never have been written about or heard of if they'd been under any other impression. Religion gets its morality from us. We know innately. You don't have to teach a child the golden rule. You sometimes have to reinforce it a bit, but you don't have to teach the principles.
Hitchens is right to warn about Iran's hidden imam. Messianic cults always end in bloodshed. The Taiping Rebellion in China killed over 20 million when a man claimed to be Christ's brother. Now imagine that same mindset with nuclear weapons. A dangerous mix of prophecy and apocalyptic technology. He's also correct about religion sabotaging science. The 2005 Dover trial proved intelligent design was theology, not science. Putting astrology beside astronomy or alchemy beside chemistry doesn't teach balance. It cripples education. Data shows states with weaker science standards score far worse in STEM. The Catholic reversal on limbo in 2007 is another example. For centuries, parents were told their unbaptized children suffered forever, then suddenly, never mind. That isn't divine wisdom, it's cruelty. The same goes for the Inquisition, Crusades, Holocaust silence, and Balkan massacres. Endless apologies from an infallible institution. Jefferson understood this. That's why he demanded a wall of separation between church and state. History shows it's the only safeguard against clerical power poisoning politics. And morality? We don't need God for that. Neuroscience proves empathy is hardwired in the brain. Anthropology shows cooperation and fairness existed in tribes long before Scripture. Even the Bible admits it. In Genesis 20, the pagan king knows lying and adultery are wrong while Abraham deceives. Morality comes from human solidarity, not from God. Religion only claimed the credit after the fact, and often corrupted it.
Same with the New Testament. How do we know this? Because the story of the Good Samaritan is told by the alleged Nazarene in whose existence I also do not believe. But he talks of a person who went out of his way on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho to help a fellow creature in need. Very obviously, this man cannot have been a Christian because it's the young Jesus talking about it. He knows the story already. He's able to tell people that's the way you should behave if you see people in trouble. He never says you need divine permission to do this or a divine warrant to do it. It's ordinary human ethics. And to say that it wouldn't be part of us, part of our warp and our weft and our woof, if it wasn't for divine permission, is to make ourselves into serfs. So I propose we repudiate that and, as it were, stand on our own 2 feet a bit more. Now, speaking of serfdom, well, Mr. Hitchens, isn't it the case that in the last century, some of the worst atrocities, if not the worst of all, were perpetrated by atheists and secularists? Is this not the fact? Very serious question. I have a whole chapter about it in my book. Shall I read it all to you? No, I won't do that. It's available at fine bookstores everywhere. And will be available after this show, where I will be very polite to anyone who has a receipt, but not to anyone else. Someone asked me the other day, "Are you a materialist?" I said, "Are you joking?" Yes. This is America. Well, take the cases that are before us, the most notorious ones. In the case of fascism, the movement that coined the term totalitarianism, that actually put it into circulation. Religion being, in my view, implicitly totalitarian with its admiration of an absolute, unchallengeable ruler. There's no other way to describe the fascist movement, beginning in Spain, Portugal, Italy, spreading through Croatia, Austria, large parts of Germany, Hungary, Slovakia, except to say it was a movement of the Roman Catholic Rite. That's what it was. It was a completely Christian movement. All of its leaders were believing Christians. It had an official concordat with the Vatican. The Nazi puppet state leader of Slovakia was actually a man in holy orders. General Franco was very nearly baptized in his rule over. Anyone can look this up. The church has never ceased to apologize for it, and nor should it. And after the war was over, they helped many of these people escape and begin constructing regimes of a similar model in South America after 1945. No wonder they can't stop apologizing. Nothing secular about that. German National Socialism, not quite the same, I have to say. It's true that the Vatican signed a treaty with Hitler the week he was installed in power. And it was for him the first and most important treaty he ever signed, the concordat with the Vatican, and neither of them ever broke it. It's also true to say that in Mein Kampf he praises the Catholic Church and never left it, and has nothing but contempt for atheism. It's also true that the Pope ordered that his birthday, the Führer's birthday, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, be celebrated from the pulpit every year, every April, which it was, to the very end. It's also true that 25% of the members of the SS, this we know from Catholic historians, were confessing Catholics, ones who went to confession, and that no one was ever threatened with excommunication for their role in the Endlösung, as the Germans call the Shoah, or the final solution. The excommunication was only used by the church politically after the war, when you were told you'd be excommunicated if you voted for the Communist Party. And it is true that Joseph Goebbels was excommunicated from the Catholic Church. But do you want to know why? Do you know why? He's married a Protestant. Married a Protestant. That's what it took to be. Next, you'll know he didn't eat fish on a Friday or something. No, excuse me, they have their standards, okay? But it is also true that Hitler sought to replace Christianity as the state religion and would have preferred an Aryan Nordic blood myth with himself as the centerpiece of it. There's no question about that. And that many brave Christians had to die on that proposition. No one can deny that. But there's nothing secular about National Socialism. And of the third partner in that revolting alliance, that of Japan, the leader is not just a man of God, but a God himself, for whom people were prepared to immolate themselves and others. The late Emperor Hirohito. While I'm at it, when his son was sent to Oxford University, this is a digression, but why not? He was sent to Magdalen College in the 30s, and the Japanese embassy sent up a team of people to see the warden of Magdalen College, Oxford. Say, are you sure you're ready to receive the Crown Prince? They said, yeah, we're ready. He's got a nice room. We have a good tutor. Apparently his English is very good. We're looking forward very much to having him as Japanese ambassador. Well, it's just we want to be sure you understand. You're calling him Crown Prince. Of course, that is his title, but you do realize that his father in our country is not thought of just as an emperor, but as God. Do you understand that? The warden of Magdalen College said, I think you'll find we're quite used to having the sons of famous people at Oxford. Anyway, don't know what brought that on. Don't know quite what made me go to that discussion. Anyway, there's nothing secular about an empire whose military ideology, by the way, was that of Zen Buddhism, for those of you who think the Eastern path is more contemplative. Its official ideology, as with the dictatorship in Burma today, is Zen Buddhism. There's nothing secular about that. So I think that clears up this frequently asked question on that side of the ledger.
Hitchens ends by exposing a tired but dishonest argument that atheists caused the worst atrocities of the 20th century. But history doesn't back this up. Fascism? Rooted in Christian nationalism. Franco, Salazar, and Mussolini were all devout Catholics backed by the Vatican. Hitler's regime signed a concordat with the Catholic Church in 1933, his first international agreement, and he remained a baptized Catholic until death. Even worse, the Church never excommunicated any Nazi for their role in the Holocaust. But Goebbels was excommunicated for marrying a Protestant. 25% of SS members were practicing Catholics, according to Catholic historians, and the Church helped many escape to South America after the war through the rat lines, with full Vatican cooperation. And Japan? Not atheist either. Its emperor was literally worshipped as a living god, and its military was infused with Zen Buddhist ideology, not secular values. These regimes weren't atheist. They were authoritarian theocracies or cults of divine leadership, no different from the religious despotisms they mirrored. As for morality, Hitchens points to the Good Samaritan, someone who helped a stranger not out of obedience to a god, but out of basic human decency. That story itself, told by Jesus, proves morality predates Christianity. You don't need divine command to know that helping someone in need is right. Now it's your turn. Do you believe religion is the source of morality, or is it something deeper, something human? Let us know in the comments below. Like this breakdown? Give it a thumbs up. Join the conversation. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into reason, history, and ideas that matter.